As we are all dealing with a winter wonderland out there, grab a cup of hot chocolate, warm up, and listen in to another episode of Mountaineer Report here, made possible by West Virginia Sports Now, available everywhere you get your podcasts, and, of course, throughout our network. I'm Mike Asti, and I will be joined by Luke Blain. We're going to touch on Curt Cignetti, a WVU alum, former quarterback, son of a former coach, winning a national championship, and what maybe that could mean for the West Virginia Mountaineers, and if Rich Rodriguez can follow the path of Curt Cignetti, and then focus a lot as well on the prospects of the Mountaineer basketball team, Ross Hodge's team, maybe a little women's with Mark Kellogg's group as well. But Joe Lunardi is starting to pump. He's trying to churn the content here of who's going to make the dance or not. And I can admit that myself, others in media, fans, the program, Lunardi himself, Luke, we probably all lost credibility after last year because it was pretty much all like, don't worry about it. They got the resume. They have the quality wins, the 6 quad 1 wins. They're going to get in. Joe Lunardi literally guaranteed it. In his final bracketology, and they didn't make the dance. So I do hear if fans just want to roll their eyes, but he has them in a group to be considered. He has them on the outside looking in and not even really on the bubble. So we're going to talk about that and what they need to do to actually make the NCAA tournament, because yes, it's year 1, but that's the standard that was set forth by Ren Baker at the intro presser, and that is the standard of the program to at least make the tournament. And that has not happened now for a couple years in a row, and 3, 4, 5 years in a row of not getting in would get into historic levels for this program and something that they do not want to become a consistent theme. So, Luke, are you keeping warm? I know you have I have more snow apparently near me, but you have a more treacherous area near you, I guess.
Yeah, we're out in the back roads of Parkersburg, so that's not a good place to be in a snowstorm like this. So we're all just kind of huddled up. We watched the football championship games yesterday. That was fun. Had some college basketball on today. So, but yeah, we're keeping warm and doing the best we can with it. So we spent a good bit of time shoveling yesterday, and now we're just waiting for our roads to get treated, which might be a little bit. So
I know all about the shoveling. Spent a birthday today
yes,
shoveling snow.
yeah.
So so that tells you the life that I am leading right now, wrangling up the kids and shoveling snow. That is the difference of my birthdays these days in comparison to years ago. But nonetheless, again, Mountaineer Report here with West Virginia Sports Now, available everywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, TuneIn, Google Play, etc., and of course here on YouTube and throughout our network. So to kick things off, before we get to all the basketball talk, Curt Cignetti from Pittsburgh, but has the West Virginia connection, of course, wins the national championship at Indiana. Indiana, of all places. We're going to put a pin and talk basketball, but previously, in the past 140 years of college athletics, if you were talking Indiana, you were talking basketball. There was no reason to discuss football prior to Curt Cignetti. They literally had 3 bowl wins. 3 bowl wins in the entire history of Indiana football prior to Curt Cignetti. We're talking like Rich Rod's first tenure at West Virginia being their entire history for 138 years prior to Curt Cignetti. And they end up winning their first Big Ten title since 1967. They end up winning the program's first national championship, and they are not a program that has even got close or sniffed it or got to the dance or the final game or anything like that, or even has an argument to claim any weird fake titles of the past on any major selectors or non-major selectors or whatever. There's not even a 1922 argument that some West Virginia fans want to bring up that they think they should claim that. And I actually kind of do think they should, but nonetheless, that argument doesn't exist for Indiana football. That does not exist. There was nothing close. The program was a laughing stock for decades upon decades. And of course, a blue blood for basketball up until maybe recently, and we'll see what DeVries does. And this puts the pressure on him for sure. We'll see what money he even gets for that program, but we'll leave that aside. But Curt Cignetti walks in the door, wins 10 games, takes him to the CFP. He then follows it up with another CFP appearance and caps that off with a 16-0 national championship season, undefeated, the first 16-0 season in college football since freaking Yale did it in 1894. And when they did it, they were playing, high school teams and, basically rec league teams in the midst of their college schedule. It was ridiculous. And I don't really want to debate whether it's the greatest team of all time. We could certainly do that. Record, I guess it would say it is. There's other teams that beat more ranked teams in a given year, so we'll leave that to be a conversation for another day. But on the purpose of this show and connecting it to Rich Rod and connecting it to West Virginia football, aside from Curt Cignetti's connection, does the success of Curt Cignetti and the instinct success at a perennial loser. It literally was the most losing program in college football history prior to his arrival, and still is the runner-up for that, even with the wins he's collected, the 27 in 2 years, which is a record, show that it can be done anywhere, and that even though Rich Rod's going into year 2 after a 4-8 season, it can be done at West Virginia, can be done with Rich Rodriguez, can be done in this era, and that any program that people would have thought had a 0% chance to ever win a national title, especially in this money-driven NIL era, now can do it if things go well. Does this now provide even more optimism and somehow show that Rich Rod can actually get this done? Forget winning 8 or 9 games or a Big 12 title. He can win a national championship within this 5-year contract because Curt Cignetti got it done in 2 years at Indiana, a traditional horrible program and a basketball school. Or it's just an aberration and people are running amok with that. And Curt Cignetti got it done at Indiana, but nobody else is going to be able to do that. And that's just a special 2-year period to history.
Yeah, I think there's kind of a case to be made both ways. I think there's a very unique situation with Indiana where Curt Cignetti comes in and he brings in a very significant amount of his players from JMU and his staff from there. So a lot of guys already know the system. Things are set in place like that because that JMU team was really good with him at the helm. So he has the opportunity to bring those guys in, and then you pair that with the NIL income, and they're obviously, probably near the top of the Big Ten. I can't imagine that they're spending more than a team like Ohio State or somebody like that. But I
there were
think there's
teams
a good
spending more, but they spent a lot. Yeah.
There's a healthy balance to be had between the NIL spending and the coaching caliber. And while Rich Rod is behind schedule, if you want to look at Curt Cignetti's timeline, I doubt that it's going to be in year 2 that this team wins a national championship. But anything can happen in college sports. But I definitely think that there is something to be said for a coach who comes in, rebuilds the culture, and then just takes the team to the promised land in a very short time period, especially in a conference as talented and Big 10. The Big 12, like they always talk about how there's an easier path to the tournament if you go to the Big 12. And while WVU, I don't think is the top NIL spending team, I think Texas Tech has that title easily. I definitely think that there is a path forward. They've gotten some good transfers coming in. Are they national title contender good? We'll see. I think that, but like we've been saying, I still think the standard for Rich Rod is going to have to be, you need to be really, if not in the Big 12 championship game, very close to it. And I think he knows that. I think the program knows that. And that's another problem with this year's incoming WVU team is you are having a good bit of roster turnover from last season. New players at quarterback, receiver, running back, a lot of new offensive line. While the offensive line, I think you've definitely upgraded from last year. You still, you're dealing with the issue of having a bunch of new players on a roster that you're going to have mesh not as quickly as you did last year because, Rich Rod's inaugural presser was in late December, but you still have that kind of sense of urgency that you're kind of behind the 8 ball a little bit in terms of building the system and team that you want to have.
I think what Curt Cignetti accomplished, and money was definitely part of it, and I enjoyed that people got mad at me for even bringing it up. But yes, they didn't spend to the level of Ohio State. They didn't even spend to the level of Texas Tech in the Big 12, who was spending way more than West Virginia, even with WVU spending more money. But they spent a lot of money still. Like, we're talking about Indiana spending 20, 21 mil and Ohio State spending 30, and people are saying, don't bring up the money. They're doing it as like a small market. That's not the case. West Virginia had $3.5 million in Neil Brown's last year. That's a fact. Neil Brown said it publicly, and that's a couple years ago. It got to maybe 5 after that, but you're talking 5 mil comparison to 21 mil. That's a gulf of a difference here, even if you're not, at the Ohio State level spending. And you got to give credit to Curt Cignetti to do this. He's a great coach. He's a Hall of Fame coach. He's going to walk in the door of the Hall of Fame now. His win percentage is through the roof, and he could even win a national title again. Forget WVU. Indiana could do it again with the team that's coming back and the money they're spending. And Mark Cuban said on the field, I'm going to spend more. They don't need really that much more. So they're going to be back, and they're going to be keep doing this. And Curt Cignetti's in his 60s like Rich Rod, but if Rich Rod's going to keep clicking, there's no reason why Curt Cignetti, with this money coming in, this roster, and kind of they're going to be a preseason 1 or 2, and as long as they win with an easy schedule right away, they're going to be right there. So they're likely going to be a CFP team every year. Doesn't mean a national title every year, but they're going to be in the thick of things every year. So money's part of it, and they got it, and they got more of it than West Virginia, which is part of how a basketball school, a horrible football school, was able to do this. They got an infusion of money, an infusion of an investment, and they got a great, legendary Hall of Fame coach. And here's my other point, who administered a culture. Rich Rod's been trying to put a culture in place. He admitted that last year that maybe I don't want to say overlooked the difficulty of that, but maybe kind of did, that he kind of underestimated that it will take a while to get his culture in place. And he's not going to walk in and say, I'm Rich Rod, it's hard edge, look at my success, everyone buys in. The players liked playing for him in a way. They looked like they were bought in throughout the season, but we've now heard some players that didn't really enjoy it. So it's harder to get players of today to buy into that. And yes, the Indiana players bought into Curt Cignetti doing kind of a hard edge thing, the never smile attitude, the perfection attitude, teaching them, you got to go to class as much as you got to play football, which is hard for kids these days when they're making money. And he put his culture in place, and they bought in. And he had a great quarterback who won the Heisman, their first ever. And when the quarterback buys in, it all trickles down. But it's been harder than Rich Rod thought, it seems, to put his culture in place. It took him till the end of last year to really get in. The players felt like they bought in all year. They were playing hard for him. But now we also hear they didn't love the experience. Most of those guys are now gone. So you got to clean up the culture. That's part of him having to kind of clean up this roster again. But it's very hard, as you're saying, to get a culture in place. If you're a culture coach, like Cignetti and Rich Rod both are, when you're having to overturn the roster so much. I mean, this year's not even close to last year, which was a record of 80 players. This is half of that, but half of that still feels like an insane amount, and is more than they thought they were going to have to do in year 2 now. I'm not predicting a national title, of course. I do think if you look at the schedule, there's a path to 8 wins, maybe 7-8 wins, which would be a giant step from last year. And as you're saying, I don't think Ren Baker is going to fire Rich Rod, or there's any pressure, or fans are going to, leave the ship if he doesn't win a national title in year 2, or even a Big 12 title in year 2. But they're going to have to show a turnaround. They're going to have to become a winning team again. They're going to have to certainly make a bowl game at minimum. And they're going to have to, as you're saying, be in the conversation at least for the Big 12 title in, say, November. Even if they don't get it, they got to win 8 games, 7 games, 9 games maybe. Any of there in that neighborhood will make you feel good. And if they do that with the improved recruiting, with the improved spending, with the improved revenue, maybe even more money coming in if they ever find a sponsor for the football stadium. Look at the money brought in for basketball with that. They're going to put one on the football, so that'd be more money coming in. They got a new press box coming in a couple years. That's going to help things. There will be more money coming in future years. So if they get a winning season, it'll take a step that maybe they actually can win a national title within this contract. If it's a 5-6 win year and they're crawling through it again, then it's going to be, you can't do the roster over again every year. Then it's going to be a problem. And, Curt Cignetti was a special thing, but you're not doing that, even in an easier conference. So the path is kind of there, because if you win a conference, you get in automatically, regardless of worrying about any committees. But it's also an issue that was, this is weird, that even though it was a harder conference of the Big Ten being a tougher conference overall, you could argue there's a little bit of a benefit for Cignetti and Indiana, that they don't have to win the conference to get in. They didn't win the Big Ten 2 seasons ago. And they got in anyway by winning a certain amount of games because you get the benefit of the doubt in that conference, even if you're not really beating that many great teams. 2 seasons ago, they had like one quality win and they got in anyway because they had a lot of wins. This past year, they beat everybody and certainly deserved it. But in the Big 12, look at BYU. You pretty much got to win the conference to get in. You're not just going to be able to get 10 wins and walk in like, say, you will out of the Big 10. So it's easier in one respect and more difficult in the other. There's a path there. You could argue there's more of a path there than there would have been in previous eras because at that point, you're just looking for a ranking and there's nothing you can do, or you're hoping to some poll puts you there and you can claim something, nothing you can do. Now there's a path, and that's how Indiana was able to do it at a basketball school. But I don't think, Curt Cignetti doing it in 2 years and having the Disney movie run that he's had so far should mean that Rich Rod or West Virginia or any similar program, Pitt, I'll throw out there, like that shouldn't mean they're all of a sudden going to turn it around and win a national title, because that's just what happens if Pitt would fire Narduzzi, that the next coach is going to walk in 2 years and win a natty. That's incredibly unlikely. Similar. We'll see what James Franklin does at Virginia Tech for another similar school. They're in the ACC, of course. It's hard to imagine that within 2 years he's winning a national title, even though he got close at Penn State. It's hard to imagine you're just going to elevate that much that quickly, even though Indiana did, and they elevated from the dirt. It's like they elevated from nothing. So if they can do it, then it can be done anywhere, but it's certainly not going to be easy. And we will see how the rest of this offseason, continues on. But there's no other portal. This is pretty much the roster. We'll see how spring ball goes. We'll see the vibe then. We'll see how the year looks. They open it up with home games and then a trip to Charlotte and then the conference schedule. It's an easier path early in the year. They don't have to worry about going to a solid group of five. There's no rivalry game to open up in the beginning of the season, unless you count that Charlotte trip. So, certainly 2 wins, 3-0 is very much on the board to open up the year before conference play. Then maybe you can get a ranking. That's kind of the first order of business. Get in the damn AP poll. They haven't been there since before Neil Brown. And they got a coaches poll ranking, but West Virginia is certainly used to at least getting AP poll rankings, even in years that they didn't like in terms of the fan base. That hasn't been happening. At least get there and then worry about the national title from then on. Luke Blain, Mike Asti here, Mountaineer Report, West Virginia Sports Now. So we're going to talk a lot more football, I'm sure, throughout the offseason, but this show now for the rest of the way here is going to be basketball talk. We're in front of another conference game for the Mountaineers, so we're recording this on Monday night. We're in front of the game against Kansas State. They do now have a road victory on the board against Arizona State, but Luke, the other Big 12 road games, not only have they lost, they've not even been in those games. They just got shellacked by Arizona. Same thing with Iowa State, etc. They do have the big win on the board already against Kansas, kind of owning the Jayhawks in recent years, no matter who's the coach. They kind of messed up a chance for quality wins and out-of-conference play. The metrics have them kind of on the fringe, not great. And then Lenardi puts them in his considering group, but not even really in his first 4 in or first 4 out. Is there a glass half full or is there a glass half empty when you saw what Lenardi put out and where you think this team is now at the end of January as far as their prospects of making the tournament? And that's still the goal from what Ross Hodge is saying.
I think there's a glass half full approach to this. I absolutely do. I think that, it is very reminiscent of Huggins last year, right? Whenever they didn't really have any of those statement big time wins other than I think you could say Auburn. And then of course that was on the home court, and then you could kind of look at Kansas as being that team's Auburn win this season. But Huggins teams often made the tournament by finishing really well in the Big 12 and playing at home and playing well at home. And that's what WVU is doing right now. Like they are on track to, they're on track to be undefeated at home. We'll see if that stands. You have a long way to go with 2 top 15 opponents in there as well. You have 2 really good chances to beat teams who are in the similar vein in the KenPom rankings right now. 58 for WVU for the way that this team has performed so far this season is honestly pretty good. And I think that there's plenty of opportunities for them to keep climbing. I think they need to win more decisively over teams. You're going to have to get some road wins in there. You have an opportunity to sweep Cincinnati coming up. You're going to get 2 chances against UCF. And I want to say there's another team they play twice, and I can't remember. It might either be TCU or it might just be those 2 teams. I'm kind of drawing
I
a
think it
blank on
might
that
be
right
TCU.
now.
Let me throw up the schedule right here. But yeah, I get your point.
Yeah.
There's definitely going to be opportunities to come. And if you take care of business at home, which is what Ross Hodge said today via Zoom because of the weather,
For
then you
Kansas
should
State.
at least be on the bubble because you should at least be on the bubble if you take care of business at home. It's easier said than done, but there is a path with the conference being so tough that if you lose the road games and win the home games, that could get you there. And
Yeah.
it is one of the better home court advantages in the country. They've been solid at home. They have the big win at home. I'm a little skeptical that they can just be so horrendous on the road, and that Arizona State game is not really that quality of a road victory. They're going to need a little bit more. And yeah, Huggins teams finished strong in the Big 12, but if you go to last year, some argue why they didn't get in with all the quality wins is because they kind of didn't finish strong. They had that bad Colorado loss. They were rough at the end of the year. This team probably is going to need to do something in Big 12 play, you would imagine, unless they get a winning streak beyond just this hot and cold trading off wins and losses, depending on whether it's home or on the way or on the road.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I can call it hot and cold for the way they've been through Big 12, just because the teams that they've gone and played on the road are just simply
That's
that
fair.
much better than them.
That's
Like they're
fair.
better built as a team. They have better front court play, back court play. And that was so evident in the Arizona game. Arizona is undoubtedly the best team in the nation right now. It
Yeah.
was, and I mean, they played like it, in WVU, it's
Yeah.
hard to go into those environments and pull off a win. I mean, let alone keep it close. And that's why I do think that they're being a bit friendly to them in the metrics right now. They really, and after any of those losses, they really didn't drop too far
Yeah.
in places like Ken Palm. The ones that carry a lot of weight right now for Ken Palm, regardless of whether you win or lose them, are the teams that are closer to your rank. So Baylor is going to
Right.
be key. You have some really good opportunities against Texas Tech and BYU, and that's even later on in the schedule. So you get more time to prepare as a team for that. I definitely think that there's a path forward here, excuse me, leading up to March, where WVU could stack some quality wins, some resume building wins, some that give them an actual good boost in the metrics. And also we still have the Big 12 tournament coming up. So
Yeah.
there's going to be more opportunities for wins, especially if they get a higher seed. So I think that's just something to keep an eye on. But I think right now the schedule does favor WVU in a way. 3 out of your next 4 are at home, and one of them, and you finish that stretch off with Texas Tech at home, where I mean the team has played
Yeah.
very, very well at home. Honor Huff, like I think, is probably, I don't have the stats in front of me, but I'd say it seems like he shoots better on the home court than he does away.
Yeah.
And then you have UCF. Utah's been very disappointing, and that's a chance for, or well, no, that's a home game, excuse me. TCU, Oklahoma State, BYU. I mean, their Big 12 schedule was so front heavy that
Yeah.
you've kind of been through the gauntlet now. So those losses are what they are. And you
Yeah.
get to kind of play with those. You get to kind of play around with a bunch of teams who are, no disrespect to any of them, but you're kind of looking at the middle of the pack of the Big 12 all the way through. So
Yeah.
it's kind of, I mean, except for, of course, BYU and Texas Tech, who you get the benefit of playing in
True.
Morgantown. So I definitely think that there are opportunities here to get some resume building wins that can boost them up way further than number 58 in Ken Palm.
Yeah. And I guess the glass half full take for me is you have a favorable schedule coming up, aside from a couple quality opponents to come. You are predominantly at home. You play well at home. Most teams play better, and most shooters play better, and find their spots. And you're on the court that you practice on. That's different than the road with the crowd, yelling at you. You have that advantage the rest of the way. You did have the tougher stretch at the beginning of Big 12 play, so now it's behind you. You at least got the Arizona State road win, which we said it was a must win. You had to get at least one road win, and that was a vulnerable one. You got it. You didn't win the other ones, but even when you got blown out to Arizona, blown out to Houston, blown out to Iowa State, they went from 70 Ken Palm at the beginning of those blowouts to now, you mentioned 58 last time I checked. And after the Arizona loss, they went from 57 to 58. They dropped one spot. Like, yeah, the metrics are basically saying you're playing the number one team in the country. You lost by 30.
Yep.
You're supposed to lose by 30. They might win the national title. You're not yet there.
Yeah.
Like, they're not going to penalize you. Maybe if you lose by 60, you drop a few spots. And it also goes to show, Luke, which I think is when you opened up by saying that it's comparable to Huggins' last tournament team a couple years ago, which feels like 7 years ago, but it's actually 2023.
It feels
so,
it does not feel like it was only 2 coaching changes ago.
I know it was only 3 calendar
2 years ago.
Right, right. But nonetheless, that team got in despite 19 wins. That team had a worse resume than last year's Mountaineer team did. That team made the tournament. Last year's team did not. But that team was able to benefit Ken Palm-wise and metric-wise, even though they had fewer quality wins and fewer wins, and last year's team was better overall, you could argue. But that team for West Virginia would move up even in losses. And that's part of the beauty of Ken Palm. Fans may hate it, but there's a beauty to it, and this team could maybe take advantage. That if, say, you're facing an Arizona, they're the number one team in the country, they're favored to beat you handily, they're at home. Here's what we're seeing, and here's the opportunity there. This is more of the glass half full that was taken advantage of by West Virginia's last tournament appearance in Huggins last year. Clearly, the metrics are telling you, Luke, that if West Virginia, in those road games, and granted the big ones are behind them, but in those road games, if they can go from losing by 30 to lose by 10, they'd probably move up in Ken Palm. And that's the opportunity that is lost, and this gets into kind of the glass half empty here, even though the schedule maybe favors them, and they could get there and maybe could make a run with their shooters in the tournament, and that then would benefit them. If they don't make the tournament, we both know, and it's not wrong to say this, Ross Hodge is going to say, well, we were right there. We showed some flashes. We had to have the team gel. It's year one. We'll be fine. Know how to do this. Trust me. Kind of what Rich Rod even said after year one, even though I'm sure Ross Hodge will end up with a better year than the equivalent of 4-8. Ren Baker's not going to fire a coach after one season. He knows the tournament is what the fans expect, but he's not going to hold the Eilert year or DeVries leaving or the committee screwing them against Ross Hodge. Those things are going to be said, and those things aren't wrong to say. However, in all reality, if this team misses the tournament, this team still only has themselves to blame, because it feels like right now that they're in the top 60 of Ken Palm. You have a solid amount of wins on the board. You do have a road conference victory. You do now have a quality win on the board. You have a few conference wins. You have a favorable schedule coming up. Clearly, if they would have picked up maybe one quality win in out-of-conference play, maybe beyond Pitt, who, by the way, is awful. It's not even really a quality win. If they would have beat Clemson, or Ohio State, either one, and the Ohio State game was very winnable, and that's an understatement, of course. And you're talking overtime.
So was Clemson.
So was Clemson, but I mean, we could debate which one is more winnable. But if you would have just won one of them, and then you would have still lost all three to Iowa State, Houston, and Arizona, but lose them in closer games. Just don't lose by 30, lose by, and that's not the exact score every one of them, but about that differential, and lose by 10 instead of 30, for example, and then you have one of those quality wins. I would venture to guess they would be inside the bracket right now. If not, right near on the bubble of the first four in or the first four out, if not in the field. That would be a difference, probably a 10. They would probably then be in the top 40 in Ken Palm, which is generally speaking for a power program that is not going to benefit from just rolling an easy schedule off a mid-major run. Generally speaking, top 40, top 45 is where you want to be to feel you're comfortable with making the tournament if you don't win a conference title. And they're not there yet. They probably would be there if they had one more quality win and they were playing closer games to teams that still beat them, that are the top 5, top 10 teams in the country, and Arizona being one. So it's still right there in front of them. They can get there. The season is far from lost yet, and they are playing better now. They are gelling now, but not to be that guy, but like if they don't get there, even though it's year one and it's not the end of the world, there were reasons to believe they still should have got there. Like this team could be in a better spot even as is, despite all the adversity.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's like, I'm gonna try to find the right way to word this, but DeVries' team last year overperformed at such a high rate in the games where nobody thought they had a chance.
Sure.
And then they dropped the games that they should have had easily.
Right.
This year, you kind of have the opposite, where WVU is like, all right, those games that you don't have a chance in, or that people think they don't have a chance in, yeah, they were right. Like they're kind of going out there,
even showing up.
like they're kind of they're losing the games you expect them to
but they're
lose.
taking care of business otherwise. Yeah.
Yes, that's what, and I mean that's why it kind of reminds me of like one of those Bob Huggins teams, specifically the last one that made it into the tournament, where, like you said, even with 19 wins, and I think you could see this team match or surpass 19 wins. You're going to have to win at a very high percentage going the rest of the way, but
I would say they're going to have to
say it's off the table.
Yeah, I would say they're going to have to probably get to at least 18 wins, I would think. Forget who they're playing, the metrics and all that. There is still kind of a minimum bar to be considered. Certainly 17 at the very lowest, but I would think 18 wins they're going to have to get to really feel like they're on the bubble. Then they're going to maybe need to beat Texas Tech or something like that. They need one because they don't have the Clemson or the Ohio State win, and if they did, they'd have that in the bag. They need to beat probably, the rest of the way looking at this schedule, they need to either beat BYU or Texas Tech as the rankings stand right now. They need to win one of those games, and they're both at home and they're both winnable, but they drop both of those and then they, win against everybody else. The committee's probably going to say you're on the bubble, but I'm going to pop it because there's no quality wins there. Last year's team again had 6 quad 1 wins and didn't get in. They had 3 top 10 wins and didn't get in. And they messed it up themselves and the committee kind of screwed them. I'm going to say that. But to avoid the committee having a chance to screw you, if you believe that, you got to beef up the resume and do more than you're doing. What they're doing this year, they're leaving the door open to get screwed because the quality wins are not there. And I would say that last year's team had a gripe. Again, if this year's team runs through the schedule the rest of the way, loses to the ranked teams, like you're saying, that when you face the teams, your underdogs, you're going to lose. Maybe you take care of business elsewhere. If that's the story the rest of the way, and they don't get in and they have their bubble popped and say they're close, again, I think they kind of have themselves to blame. I don't think the governor needs to be talking about it. Like, I don't think we need a press conference if that's the case. They messed up some chances of quality victories here. I don't think it'll be as egregious as a season ago. Now, on the court-wise, not even just this game in front of Kansas State, but on the court-wise with this remaining schedule, what do you think they need to do to remain in this conversation where Lenardi's going to have them on the sheet? Like, what do they need to do to keep being this type of team? We've seen Eagles staff really step it up and score some points, but they haven't always won when that's happened. Granted, they played some great teams. We've seen Honor Huff kind of dissipate a little bit and drop off from where he was a couple weeks ago. We've seen Obi Oha have some big games where he's that big presence, but also kind of drop off at times earlier in the season. He's played well recently. What needs to happen for them to be in this legit conversation and to get enough victories to get in on the court?
Well, I think defending home court is priority number one. Home court wins are going to help you in the net and Ken Palm drastically. Those are types of wins that, like, the teams that play well at home are the teams statistically that do get those better boosts, which kind of goes without saying. You have more opportunities to lose points at home than you do, I guess, points if you want to frame it that way. But I do definitely think the post play has to be there. And I think we've seen that throughout Big 12 play. Not to boil it down to just Harlan Obioha, but they are undefeated this season when he scores double digits. And that goes all the way back to Pitt. And I mean, it's like, and you can say that that's a product of maybe the outside shooters playing really well or things like that. But he had double digits against Colorado and they won that one. He had double digits against Kansas, obviously the game where he just went insane against Pitt, like his season high of 19 points. they need that dominant presence because the teams that they played on the road do have that dominant presence. And I
Yeah.
think he can be that dominant presence, but he just has to be that consistently and he has to be that at home. And you're going to get some mismatches. Like the Big 12, like I don't think Harlan Obioha is the worst center in the Big 12. I think he's going to have
Yeah.
opportunities to go out there and dominate in the post and help his team out on the boards, inside scoring, wherever that may be,
Yeah.
but you're definitely going to need him to step up and you're going to need some help from DJ Thomas. DJ Thomas has been doing well. And, there's obviously Brennan Lorient, who's had some
Yeah.
really good games as of late. And sometimes he's really gotten them out of those scoring droughts that they have a bad habit of getting into. But
Mm-hmm.
I think now this team kind of feels to me like it's a bit more battle tested. It's really been through the gauntlet of the Big 12 as it stands, and now you don't really have at least you're not going to step into the house of a BYU or Texas Tech. They're going to come to you, and you have some
Yeah.
more time between those games to kind of get ready for them. And 3 out of your next 4 at home, and the one that it isn't at home is at Cincinnati. So it's not like you're going over to the West Coast and then coming back. So you have a nice little stretch right here where I do think that they have the potential to get into a run here, assuming they take care of business the way they need to. And I mean, you were talking about it. I just counted it up. WVU has 12 more games on the schedule.
Okay.
If
Yeah.
you're looking at it if you're looking at it from a bracketology standpoint, whatever it may be, I think you and I can agree that if they go out there and go 12-0, I think they're a lock. I
Oh, sure.
definitely think that. I definitely think
Sure.
that. Yeah, I definitely
Sure.
think that should be the case. So it's still very much in their hands. It's whether or not they go out there and perform on the court. So
What do you think the
like we
record
keep
has
talking.
to be, though? Figuring they're not going to go 12-0. Like they're not going to go 12-0. So what
I
do
would
you?
agree with you and say, let's see, they are 13-7 now. I would almost need to think 20 wins. I would need to think that
To feel
because with
safe.
12,
To feel
yeah,
safe. Yeah.
12 games remaining, if you go 12-0, you're 25-7. If you only win 18 games, that means you finish the regular season 18-19 and
Yeah.
win only 5 out of your last 12. I don't think that's going to be enough. I think you
No.
at least need to get to the halfway point of 12, which is 6, but I would say 20 just to be safe. And I'm going to try to do some speed math here and count
And
how
then
many of
probably
those
win a
are at
tournament
home.
game or so. Maybe win a tournament
I
game to
think
feel
so.
comfortable. You can't have the Colorado repeat of last year where you think you're good and then you drop a bad game. Like they probably need, you don't have to make a run, but if you do that and get to 19, 20 wins, you probably need at least one more on the board in conference tournament play.
Yeah, half of those are at home, half of those are away.
Okay.
And I think,
Yeah.
say you just win your
And the
home
tough
games.
games are at home. The ranked
Yeah,
teams are at home. Now, you
yeah,
previously faced the ranked teams on the road, with the exception of Kansas, who is a quality win. They were at the
yep,
time, they're ranked 22nd. But let's be honest, this is not, you know, your older brother's Kansas team, let alone your father's or your grandfather's. Like, this is not a national championship Kansas team here. Bill Self has even said that they're a little lesser. So it's a big win. It counts. Beating up on Kansas is a fun thing for Mountaineer Nation, but this is not like you're beating the 2008 Kansas team. This is a little bit of an up and down Kansas team, and that again, I think that being your only quality win is going to be a problem. Even if you get enough victories, I do feel like aside from your math, one of those games got to be Texas Tech or BYU. You got to probably get one of those, especially with them both.
yeah.
With having the chance there, like you got to get one of those both left on the schedule there. Texas Tech being at home. Take advantage of home court, defend home court. You should probably be okay to at least be in the conversation here. Now, back to what they can do on the court. And Obioha is really the unsung key piece of this team. Everybody talks about Eagle staff and his up and down season, how he was, really horrible and out of conference play, and he's really turned it on recently. And he's even talked about that he got benched in a game. He only had 1 point in a game. He only took a couple shots in a game, and now he's, scoring 20 points a game. That's a big deal. He's picking up for Honor Huff, who's had a little bit of a lesser road recently. But Obioha is definitely that key player. And Brennan Lorient's kind of an underrated scorer as well. He's definitely carried them through some stretches when they've struggled offensively, and he can even rebound. He's kind of been able to do it all at times for this West Virginia team. But Obioha is that player that I don't think everyone's talking about enough. You mentioned when he gets into double digits in scoring. The only game that I can think of here that he really didn't play all that well, and they won anyway, was the road game at Arizona State. Only 6 points. I believe he only had 1 or 2 boards in 20-some minutes. He didn't do what you normally expect from him in the wins there, but they won anyway. Outside of that, if he doesn't perform, and at least he doesn't have to necessarily score, like he's not going to be their leading scorer, but he got to at least get to a certain level, impact the game, use his size, get down in the paint. That has to be the case. He has to be aggressive. Of course, the Pitt game is the peak of that, but obviously Pitt's a horrible team from what we've seen since then. If he doesn't do any of that, especially early in games, then that's how you can get down big, and that's how it can be rough for you. Because if he's not doing that, or DJ Thomas, I guess, another player that could do it, if either one of them aren't doing it, then you're relying on Eaglestaff, Huff, or Lorient to get hot. And they could, but they also could not. And then if they don't, you're in trouble in this Big 12. And even when you have Oioha getting it done, most of the teams in the conference, especially the good ones, are still bigger than you. I mean, even West Virginia's leading scores. I mean, Eaglestaff's, he's kind of tall, but Honor Huff's a small player when he was leading them throughout a conference play. Most Big 12 teams have bigger bodies than what West Virginia is putting forth. They need Oioha to be at his best.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest. I mean, that's the biggest problem that last year's squad had easily. Amani Hansberry could get you some boards, but he really wasn't going to help you on the inside, especially if he, his strong suit offensively was scoring from the outside. So that takes out your tallest player down low to be able to get any sort of an offensive rebound if that's what you're working with. And, I was thinking about, I always said it, I always thought that if you could just copy and paste Jesse Edwards on the last year's Mountaineer team, you would have had a surefire, no doubt tournament team, truly. And I think, like Harlan Obioha standing at 7 feet tall is definitely what they need height wise and size wise. He has a very good frame, but there's just got to be more opportunities for him to score on the inside. Going 2 for 5 in the, from the floor on the inside whenever you're shooting from within 5 feet of the basket just isn't going to cut it. I think that, other teams have learned to cover Honor Huff and Trayson Eaglestaff so much because Trayson Eaglestaff is still getting that respect despite what he did early in the season, right? And everybody knows how capable of a shooter Honor Huff is. They need somebody who's going to step up and take advantage of that space that creates in the low post, who can go in there and make the defense collapse a little bit so the shooters on the outside can get some more breathing room. And I think that I've said it since before the season began that Harlan Obioha has potential to be that guy. And there are some times where he has been that guy this season. But I think you need that even more in Big 12 play right now.
100%. Luke Blain, Mike Asti here, Mountaineer Report, West Virginia Sports Now. Again, available everywhere you get your podcasts, here on YouTube and throughout our network. We have kind of been dancing around the player that's also a key. He was when they were winning in out-of-conference play. He was even in the games they lost. We've seen Eaglestaff kind of be that guy recently, and that is Honor Huff. Now, it's a lot to put on a smaller player like that, and obviously they had to have a guy like Eaglestaff step up for the team to have a chance. That was how they were built, for it not to just be run Honor Huff. But Honor Huff had a stretch back in December where he was putting up 24, 13, had a rough game with a 6 against Iowa State, then 24, 23, 13, and 14. He was scoring left and right. And even before that, 24 and 24, one of those games against Wake Forest. So that's mostly power competition with 4 games of 20-plus points for a small player like that. And that was while Eaglestaff was struggling. And they eventually lost in double overtime to Ohio State. You had the Iowa State loss, Houston loss, but most of those losses there are only to really, really quality teams. One of those also you want to have back is Wake Forest that we didn't mention earlier. You probably should have won that game, and if you won that game, that would be nice on the board for this resume too. However, in more recent games, 10 against Arizona, 8 against Arizona State, which was a victory. He did have 14 against Colorado, but even percentage-wise, it's certainly just kerplunked. I mean, 20. He's shooting now 20. he's now shooting below 30 in most of these recent games. Against Arizona, he shot 26.7% from the field. Against Arizona State, despite 8 points, 22.2. He did have 44 against Colorado, but before that, 36% against Houston, 41 in the game against Kansas, which, of course, was the big win for this team. Prior to that stretch, he was shooting 50% against the Bearcats, 40+%, 40+% against Ohio State, mostly 40% around that neighborhood. The Iowa State game was also really, really bad. Only 11%, 1 for 9 from the field. The point of all of that is, Luke, recently, Honor Huff struggled to be as effective as he was back in December when they were really relying on him, even early in the turn of the new year. And I'm not saying he got to shoot 50% and have 25 points. That's a little unreasonable, and it was unreasonable then. And that was when Eagle Staff wasn't scoring. They need Lorient. They need Eagle Staff to be what they've been recently the rest of the way for them to have a chance. It can't all be on Honor Huff. But can this team make the tournament and do enough, regardless of it all, if they don't get more of the better Honor Huff than what we've seen recently? I mean, he's been a little bit of a roller coaster ride despite the fans loving him so much, and he's given it his all. But an 11% night, a 22% night, a 26% night is one of your top scorers on the team. Those nights really can't happen, I don't think, for this team to make the tournament again. I mean, those got to be behind him, and there's too many of those the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, it's no secret, like you said, that he's kind of been the driving force offensively for this team. And the way the team's playing right now, I, I think you have a little bit more wiggle room with him than you did Javon Small last year. Like last year, if Javon Small didn't drop 20, the team just flat out wasn't in the game, right? I think that, Trace and Eagle staff has found his rhythm here and there so far in Big 12 play. I think he looks much more confident shooting the ball. If you can get some good nights from him, I think that absolutely gives Otter Huff a little bit more wiggle room to maybe not have the best offensive performance. But I think it does come back to the idea of they are just face guarding him the whole time. And, we know he can make those shots too when he is being guarded like that. And a lot of, many of his, lower scoring games have come on the road. I mean, 6 points at Iowa State, 8 points at Arizona State, 10 points at Arizona. If you can get if you can get the good Honor Huff whenever BYU and Texas Tech come to town, not saying that he hasn't been good on these other games. I think just the sad reality of basketball is sometimes shots don't go in, right? And I mean, he's still shooting a very good clip at 38.1% from 3-point range. So I think you have to be able to look at it and say, he's helped them to some wins that, if he wasn't on the court, they might not have had. And I think you got to be able to take him for what he is as a shooter. And sometimes shooters miss. I mean, he had a really good look to start the Arizona State game, like Ross Hodge noted after that one. That's part of getting into a good start on the road. And, you just miss. And that's where defense comes in and things of that nature. But I think that there is kind of a tendency to get over reliant on him for the offensive output. I think Wake Forest was a key example of that.
They were doing that a couple weeks ago. Like they were doing that around Christmas time. That was clearly what they were doing then. They're not doing that as much now, and it is part of Eagle staff and Lori and others picking it up. But I think that the way this team is built, even if they also don't make the tournament, forgetting how the overall is going to end. And DeVries' team, everyone hates him, of course, but he had a 10-win turnaround from the team that he took over. They should have made the tournament. It was a solid coaching job in all reality, but also led by Javon Small. If Javon Small wasn't doing what he was doing, they wouldn't have been near it either. But this roster is built better. I mean, that team was built, even if Tucker DeVries played all year, it was built for two guys and everybody else just around them. And when Tucker DeVries stopped playing or got hurt or whatever you want to believe, then it was all Javon Small. And as you said, if he didn't score 20 points, they had no shot at all, even when they had a great defensive effort. I mean, they were in 300s offensively at times in their ranking, and then, top 20 defensively, and they weren't in the tournament. It was just bizarre. This team is built better. They're built deeper. They're built more sound. It's not just one guy. If Honor Huff has an off night, Eagle staff, Lorien can pick him up. There is more size here. There's more rebounding here. There's more of a bench here. They're getting more from youth here. Like, there are those pieces that weren't really on last year's team to compare these two teams. Even if the record's not better and they also don't make the tournament, the way this roster is built should provide a little bit more comfort. But you mentioned Honor Huff's 3-point shooting. And again, maybe it's just being on the road versus being at home, although he's going to have to do some of this on the road as well. It's solid in general. But again, recently from 3-point range, 22%, 25%, 28%, 22%. That's his last 4 games. So average-wise, it's fine, but recently it's not been fine. And one of those games is at home against Colorado that he only shot 28% from 3. So he needs to pick it up. He needs to be better, but it can't all be on him. It is a team effort.
Right.
They have to have everybody. If he picks it up and then Eagle staff goes back to what he was in November, it's not going to matter. They all need to do this collectively. And Honor Huff kind of is that feast or famine. I mean, ball don't lie. Like, he's that feast or famine shooter. He's averaging 16.3 points per game, 38.9% from the field. You mentioned 38% or so from 3-point range. But part of, I think, why his percentage has been a bit lower recently and why those road matchups are worse for him outside of just it usually is for anybody. It feels like to me, either he's pressing or he just takes worse shots on the road. Like, sometimes he's forcing shots that, yeah, he can sometimes shoot with 2 hands in his face and with, right here. And he can shoot a Steph Curry 3. He shouldn't be taking him all the time or as often when he's not freaking Steph Curry. Like, sometimes he gets that mentality, it feels like, on the road, whereas at home, he just finds a rhythm and then stays to what he's used to. I don't know how you fix that either, but they got to do a little bit better on the road, even though they're playing great teams. And I do think it'll be indicative, Luke. They have Kansas State at home. It'll be indicative, though, of how this team really will play and what their chances will be, and if they can really make the tournament on how they play in their next road game. You mentioned Cincinnati. They will have Baylor at home and then Cincinnati as a close road trip. They got to perform in that one. That's not a far trip. Then they're back home. Then UCF. It's, of course, a further trip, but they get on a plane. It's not like they have to go across the country. It's an easier trip to go to West Virginia to Florida. People vacation and do it all the time. Those are winnable road games. Yeah. Winnable road games, and they certainly got to play better. They certainly can't lose by 20 plus. Those games, I think, are more indicative of if this team can make the tournament to me than Kansas State or Baylor, even though you got to win those games too. But this team's proven they can get it done at home. They all shoot well at home. They play their best at home. Hodge calls the best game at home. They need to do that on the road. Like, we got to stop having press conferences where Ross Hodge says, well, we got our tails whipped, and that one's on me. I didn't have this call right. I didn't do this. So, I got to fix this for preparation. This guy didn't shoot well. This didn't go well. We know we're in a tough road environment. The calls aren't going to go our way. That's just life in the Big 12. He doesn't make excuses, but you just can't keep having, well, everybody, me on down, wasn't good enough today. Back at home, it's all great. Like, you got to do something. You got to meet that in the middle a little bit more on the road, even though they're playing great teams. They got to do more on the road, especially now these winnable games coming up. And Luke Blain here, Mike Asti, Mountaineer Report, West Virginia Sports Now. We'll round it out with the women's team. I mean, they're back to being ranked. They're in the top 25 again. They stabilized themselves at number 22. They had an undefeated week this past week after getting up and down weeks in the prior weeks where they at one point slipped out of the top 25. But as we've said, it's not so much if they're going to make the tournament. They're going to make the tournament. But can this finally be the year that maybe they win a Big 12 title? That's something left for Mark Kellogg to do in his early tenure. Can this finally be the year that they actually get to the Sweet 16 and make a run in the NCAA tournament? Can their seed line be good enough to actually allow that to happen because of the home games and having to play on the road early in the NCAA tournament if you don't have a solid seed line? So is any of that still on the board? Are there goals on the board for this women's team, and what do they need to do to make it happen where they stay ranked, they get a solid seed line, they actually have a chance to get to the Sweet 16, which is their goal, and they set it before the season. But they missed some opportunities in some big games as well, and they dropped some bad games earlier in the season. That their resume right now, despite being ranked, is not really where it was the last couple of years, and we saw where those seed lines were.
Yeah, I think that you definitely have you have chances for some more of those quality wins. You get a chance to have that sweep over Colorado because they did already beat
Yeah.
them this season. Am I correct in that? Oh no,
West
I'm not.
Virginia? Yeah, no,
I thought they already
yeah,
played Colorado. When did they play them?
yeah.
Are you sure? I'm looking at. Okay. Either way, I definitely, I think, you get Baylor coming up. Baylor's ranked above you, and then there's multiple chances to get some of those double wins over teams, and you have a lot more games at the Coliseum coming up. But they have been
Yeah.
playing really well as of late. I really like their performance against BYU. I was watching that one the other night. Arizona State
Mm.
was another tough physical win. You're going to go to Cincinnati. You have a chance to. Or you're going to host Cincinnati. You have a chance for that second win over Cincinnati. I
And
I
Colorado's
think
coming
that
up on February 4th, by the way. Colorado's coming up on
yes.
February 4th. Yeah.
Yeah, for some reason I thought they already played them. I thought that was going to be round two, but I guess
That was
not.
the rough game last year, if you recall, but
Yes,
not
yeah,
but not
that
this year.
was very first
Yeah.
Big 12 game, and they dropped
Right.
that one. But I do, man, I think if you're not in one of those top four seeds, I really think that the loss to TCU is going to be one that you kind of kick yourselves for, and but you kind of have a chance to remedy that if you can beat them in Fort Worth, which they're going to be going
Sure.
there on February 15th. I think there's a path to it. I do think it kind of involves at least being in the Big 12 championship game. You get a chance to kind of solidify yourself as one of the top teams of the conference if you can go all the way and make it there. And I mean, even though their resume, like you said, isn't as good, I think they're playing a lot of these teams a lot stronger than they have in years past.
Sure.
Like there were times where, you would take TCU and then those games, like I think they got beat pretty bad by TCU a time or two here in recent history. There was one year against Iowa State that they just weren't in the game. There was another one, I believe, against Arizona a year or two ago, but if you can kind of solidify yourself and beat Baylor, you pick up TCU, you get to finish off Cincinnati there too.
Yeah.
It feels like there's a bit more parity in the Big 12 this year. I mean, WVU isn't getting as many blowout wins as they were, but I think they're doing a better job of dragging those teams kind of into the mud in terms of defense and quote unquote ugly basketball, however you want to call it. But they're doing
Yeah.
it and they're winning games and they're having a very good resume or a good resume for where they are in the season currently.
Yeah, and aside from TCU and Baylor, it's a favorable schedule the rest of the way. A lot of home games as well for West Virginia. A lot of home games in their toughest games. Baylor at home, TCU is on the road, but Baylor at home, and most of these other ones are at home. They're going to finish at home. That's a benefit. I do think they kind of have to make a run in the Big 12 tournament, finally make a real legit run to get a solid seed line where they want to be. This does feel like they're in line for an 8-9 seed yet again, which would probably make it really rough to maybe win a tournament game, but it'd be make it really rough to get to the Sweet 16, which is all that's left to do for the program under Mark Kellogg, really. They've done everything else. Winning a Big 12 and getting to the Sweet 16 are the two goals left to do. And the program's clearly one of the best top 25 programs in the country in women's basketball in recent years, but they haven't been in the Sweet 16 since 1992. Like, it's just hard in the women's game if you're on the road because you're not going to get calls. You're facing a top seed really quick in that second round. The seed line matters more in the women's game than the men's game. And this team does not have the WNBA player that last year's team had in JJ Quinterly. She's not there now. They don't have a WNBA player. There were players emerging, but they knew it going into the year they needed more depth and they didn't have a WNBA player. I thought this team maybe would dip back and this would be kind of a rough year. They've actually played over that expectation a little bit for people that thought maybe they would revert back to the mean because you don't have JJ Quinterly around anymore. So you give that as a positive. That's credit to the staff. But you mentioned that TCU game earlier. I mean, another one, and this is part of the resume despite not being in conference play, that Villanova game. I mean,
Yeah.
that literally is the worst game that Mark Kellogg has coached since arriving in West Virginia. You lose by 30 against Villanova at home. At home. They were hosting
Yeah.
recruits. You can ask our Griffin Floyd. They had shrimp scampi. They were providing everything you could imagine to the fans and media that day, and they didn't show up. The catering showed up. The team didn't show up. Those losses didn't happen the last couple years, and those losses could eventually hurt them in the seed line discussion. They're going to get in the tournament, but it's about more than that now for this team. We will see what happens. They have some big games they have left that they can win. They really probably need to win both of those 2 ranked games the rest of the way. And unlike the men who are going to lose some, this women's team, they could run the table. It wouldn't shock anybody. I mean, we've seen Kellogg do that. If they win those ranked games, they probably should be favored in pretty much every other game the rest of the schedule. They deserve their ranking, but it's about more than that this year, and it feels like it's going to be harder to get that proper seed that can allow you to get where you want to be. But Mark Kellogg made it clear that that is the goal of Sweet 16 or hosting a game, and that's just probably not happening this year based on where the resume is. So those things are on the board, I guess, but not going to be easy, and they're going to have to pick it up. And, one thing that's nice, too, in terms of on-the-court play, certainly from recent games, Luke, they've proven they can win in multiple ways.
Yeah.
They can score 90 points. They can also win a game they're only scoring 50-some points. They strangled Arizona State to death. They didn't allow them to even get to the free throw line at all. They won that game purely on defense. And then you flip it, and right after that, they go from 53 to 43 in a win against Arizona State. They don't allow Arizona State to get to the free throw line at all. And then 3 days later, they hang 91 points on BYU and win 91-77. The defense was not as great as against the Sun Devils, but they scored 91 points a day after, or a couple days after they scored 53. And prior to the 53 game, they had 84 against the Bearcats. They've also lost to TCU 51-50, which is a game that's going to kill them by that 1 point loss. So they've had those games where they're in the 50s, they're playing great defensively, and then they've had games where they scored 80 plus and even the 90 plus. They can do it multiple ways. That's a benefit. Not every team can do that. So that's on coaching. That's a benefit. That's on roster building, and that can show you they can do something the rest of this year. That'll do it for this edition of the show. Again, like, subscribe, comment, do whatever you want here. Every episode of Mountaineer Report is available everywhere you get your podcasts, here on YouTube and throughout the West Virginia Sports Now Network. For Luke Blain, I'm Mike Asti, and stay warm out there. And maybe these teams need to stay warm shooting-wise, because it's been cold outside, and they've also been cold at times shooting-wise.